Hello, and thank you for listening. My name is Luke Mardigan, the owner of the Mardigan Agency in St. John's, Michigan. A lot of people ask me, why do you have a radio show? Well, we've been able to accomplish something that a lot of captive insurance agencies have not, and that is we have a self-managing team and we have scalable sales systems. And so today we are going to share a little bit about how we've accomplished that, and it's how it's brought us to a place where we are about double the size of the average captive insurance agency in the nation in the United States. And last month we launched a new series talking about the concept of no-brainers and never happens. And since we've already explored the concept of no-brainers, which was just a few episodes ago, if you want to just scroll down on iTunes or Spreaker or whatever you're listening on, and or if you're on the radio, jump on an app. But we're going to talk about never happens today. And of course, joining me for today's discussion is our guest,
Alec Nurnberg, Director of Operations at the Mardigan Agency.
And my awesome co-host,
Eric Gestring, the Mardigan Agency. So Luke, we've gotten into the no-brainers. We dug into it pretty deeply. I want to recap on never happens, and I want you to kind of describe that for us.
Never happens are things that should never happen in your business.
Dig into it a little.
So no-brainers are things that are completely avoidable. Like, you know, if you just put a process in place, then it just becomes something that happens every time. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to work on it. It's not something that needs to be given a lot of time or attention to. It just happens. The never happens are the events that, for your customer-facing experience, they should never experience. So that could be a million things depending on what industry you're in. In our industry, things like your insurance company should never pull money out of someone else's account to pay your premium, right? That should never happen. These are things that are easily avoidable if you have checks in place to prevent them from happening. So no-brainers are preventable on the front end. Never happens are things that are preventable if you have a check in place, so that there's one final stop on the train track before you get to the, oh crap, we crashed.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't do the Back to the Future driving it off the end of the rail into the ravine and hoping that you hit light speed.
Absolutely.
So that's what a never happen is.
A good example, I think, of that would be, introducing a CRM system or some sort of software system without a test phase, just implementing it and assuming it's going to work
an
flawlessly.
End user test phase, right? Like Apple iOS, they have, you can actually buy into the developer program and you can get early access to the newest iOS before it's released and pushed to the public. That's designed because you can actually put it on your phone and every day you run it.
What a model. They have people paying in to test something.
Yes.
That's incredible.
And then they have their actual employees. Like, there's been stories
They're
of
always carrying them.
Apple employees, forgetting a, prototype iPhone on a trolley in San Francisco and stuff, and that's because they're actually having their employees who are end users walk around with that phone and see if they like
Test it like the everyday user.
Yeah.
So why is it that these bigger companies or corporations are still missing that? That's a question, right?
I think it's a lot more common to not miss it just because of the emphasis that's been put on R&D. A superior product is the easiest differentiator in a lot of cases. I think, you develop a product, you file a patent, and it's yours, and if anybody copies it, you sue them. But to get there, all you have to do is have good R&D. A good product will market itself. We don't see a lot of commercials for iPhones. That's because we know iPhones are great products. Like, it's probably the most used phone in the world. And
actually, I think Androids are
the most used phone.
Yeah.
Really?
Because they're the cost of access is lower. So like in foreign nations.
Yeah. But regardless, everybody has iPhones. They know it's a good product, and
if you're an iPhone, if you're a Mac person, if you're an Apple person,
right?
You're an Apple person, right? You just get it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's user friendly.
It.
And it's good to use.
Yeah, but to answer your question, because I agree that I think that's I think this is less common than people probably think.
Yeah.
But that's because so this goes all the way back to literally the military industrial complex, where Henry Ford's putting an assembly line together and a guy gets his hand chopped off and they're like, that shouldn't happen. Like that's a never happen. We should never have someone get their hand chopped off. How did it happen? And then they go back and they fix it and they prevent it from ever happening again. And then in the military, you had World War I, which was the largest, deployment of military forces ever, right? And at the time, and you have so many layers of people and logistics to get stuff and people across the Atlantic Ocean
Right.
to Europe to fight this war. And suddenly you figured out that like, whoa, we should probably like, there's certain things that we should just prevent from happening. Like we just need to, you know, so you have range rules, for instance, you know, if you're shooting, it's, you don't put your gun at something unless you're planning on destroying it. Right.
Yeah.
So you should never point your gun at something unless you want it destroyed.
Fact.
That's a never happens, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, so you have negligent discharges, which, you know, happen and that's human error. You can't always control for human error, but when you make the base rule, you never point your gun at something unless you want to destroy it, then that should theoretically never happen,
Definitely.
right? So that goes way back to military industrial complex 100 years ago.
But there's still those rare occasions where big corporations will drop the ball on it, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think it's kind of like a risk analysis, sort of like a broad risk analysis to begin with, you know, like you're calculating things that could go wrong with a product or a system that you're implementing, and you're avoiding those outcomes.
Well,
you know?
the attention to detail of having it all the way down to the consumer, the client.
Right.
So a good example is, you know, in the film industry, they have people, their entire job is to prevent inconsistencies from occurring in the film, right?
Yeah.
So if the actor has a tie on in one scene and at some point he decides to take it off during another take, that take isn't in the movie because that would be an inconsistency, and it actually pulls the watcher out of the story and into reality.
Well, certain watchers, like I notice stuff like that.
Yes, but even with that person in their job being completely based on just trying to find those inconsistencies and preventing them, they still have that.
Yeah.
Right. So you really have to create. It has to be intentional. It never happens. Aren't prevented because you're really smart. They're not prevented because you have the best people. They're prevented because you actually give attention to it. You are intentional with the way that you operate so that you prevent these things from happening. A great example for us is our old commercial system was very, very manual. And because it was manual, you had 3 spots where data input could just go wrong. It's human error. It was
With redundancies. Especially.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'd have to put the same information in like 3 times in the application. And then it's even worse for the processors and the integrators.
Then they're looking at things and they get mixed up. And
Yeah. So, you know, the agency would have to submit the paper application, which was a PDF that was filled out or handwritten in. And then a processor would take that application, hand type it into the system, which is kind of like still based off like MS-DOS. It was a really old system. And then that would go to an underwriter for final approval. And he'd be the one who would actually do like rate adjustments and make sure that everything's supposedly accurate according to what you put on the application. And then we would get a rate sheet back. Well, what we were finding is that we had enough errors on it just because of that many people touching it and so many data input points that we stopped allowing our policies to get mailed to our clients. So if you were a commercial client, we would have your policy mailed to us. We would verify its accuracy, correct anything if we needed to, and then mail you the actual like accurate 100% copy, because our clients should never get a declaration page for their most important asset, their business that they're paying $10, $20, $100,000 of insurance for, and have it be wrong.
Right. And that's kind of my point, is that there's still agents that don't realize that, and they'll have it sent right to their client.
Yes.
You know, and I mean, theoretically, you shouldn't even have to worry about that, right? As an agent, should you have to?
No, you should not have to. But when there are inefficiencies, you as a business owner, an agent, in our instance, have to overcome those inefficiencies with our own never happens within our agency.
Yeah.
Correct.
You know, you can't sit there and be like, you know, oh, well, the government messed up. You know,
That's how it is.
right. If something happens enough, then you just learn to expect it, and then you put processes in place.
Right.
Either no brainers or never happens. So you're either preventing it on the front end, or you're preventing it on the very back end, right before it goes to customer facing.
I'm glad you said that. So why is it so important to name your never happens? What value does it bring to the agency when you do that?
It sets a standard. That becomes a standard of excellence in your organization. You know, as long as you have those never happens in place, those are non-negotiable. There's no questions asked. Those are not going to happen, because you have successful systems in place that will filter those out. You know, if the inefficiencies are coming from a higher level, It's your responsibility to have a filter in place to continue to filter those out. There's not a perfect organization.
No.
You know, so
But I think if anyone gets it close, it's the military.
yes,
Just because
agree.
they're literally, it's just a giant organization of checklists, and there's so many layers to
Right.
our United States military.
risk assessment every day.
Yes, that you actually have people,
0-7
and that's
to-
their main job is to prevent bad stuff from happening, right? So you've both been deployed. Eric, you're a naval veteran, and Alec, you're a Marine.
Took me a
Like a
second.
cran. I mean, oh,
Yeah, I meant to say, I was going to say crane eater, but
Killed me.
that's,
That was
that's
the
not
Marine
that's not your formal title. And you're both deployed overseas. Was there ever a time that you were deployed and you got to where you wanted to go and your stuff wasn't there?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
So did somebody mess up their job?
Yeah, people get fired over that.
Yeah.
You can get fired in the military. A lot of people don't know that. It's usually officers or staff NCOs. They just send them away,
Yes.
and which is
Which
usually
means they're
good
in
at
shore
times.
duty
yeah,
cleaning dirty diapers
Swabbing
in
the
a hospital or
right.
something.
Yeah,
Cleaning dirty diapers.
it's like an E6 or E7.
Yeah, so somebody messed up their job, right, when they did that, because something that should never happen is your troops, your seamen, your devil dogs should never get to where they need to go to fight a battle and not have what they need to fight it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's always logistics too. I feel like.
Yeah.
Was that the
There's
case with
always
you?
a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Right.
So everything we do is especially modern warfare. We have joint task force, so we're talking about multiple branches working together.
Right. Mhm.
So the inefficiencies
Nations.
of each branch are going to be brought to light. Not only that, but you have to coordinate these multitude of branches to work together to make one thing work. It's challenging, right?
Which
So-
the reality is, private industry is not much different.
Yeah.
Right. When we have a project go live, like we just moved over to a new homeowner system, it's not just IT. There were underwriters involved. There were user interface programmers involved. There were actuaries involved. There were executives. There were some agents that were involved. It was, there were so many layers of things that you had to consider and bring in that if you weren't intentional about it, then you can mess it up. And,
Right.
and
Yeah.
with this system, we kind of messed it up. It went live before I think it was fully through testing. And that should never happen, because those inefficiencies. So why are never happen so important? We got a couple minutes here to wrap up. Never happens are so important. They should be a massive priority for your business, because it is costing you a crap ton of money dealing with things that should never happen. If it should never happen, then you definitely shouldn't lose money because it happened. And that's, if never happens, you lose money.
Right.
And none of us are in business to lose money.
If it costs you 1 minute, it's cost you too
But
much.
it makes you
Yes.
scratch your head when you see never happens happening a lot, right?
Well-
it makes you go, "What, dude? Do you not see how much money you're losing?"
Well, I think you
yeah.
just
Come on.
point out that's your standard, and that's why you're able to identify it.
Ooh,
Like I say,
yeah.
your is in us, but I think it would be easy for us to, not easy, but we've already identified them, so we can point those things out to other people.
Yeah.
Create their standard for them. With these never happens. But they just haven't identified. Sorry.
Yeah, well, they don't identify them usually because they're not the end user.
Right.
Right.
And that's not a consideration for them
No.
for some reason.
That's why, you have Domino's with like the delivery insurance.
Yeah, right.
Well, like delivery insurance is just their way of saying,
Why do I need that?
We will never get your order wrong.
Right.
The fact that industry has to say that,
Right.
Or like, I text you when I was in
Yeah,
Florida last
yeah.
week.
Or
Alec.
we won't drop your pizza.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we're not going to. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But I was in Florida getting a rental car, and I'm standing in the airport, and they have these giant flat screen monitors in the background of all the customer service reps. And one of their signs says, this is a car rental company, okay? They rent cars to people. This is all they do. They don't have any other lines of revenue. They just rent cars to people. We promise to get you on the road safely.
Wow.
Why does that need to be said? Like
How many people are
you're
getting
selling
ran
that?
over in your
Yeah.
parking ramp that you need to say that, hey, we probably should not let that happen.
Yeah, you're selling an expectation as an accommodation.
Yes.
That's not good.
No, that's not good. And I think
If you have clients or consumers that can see through it, like you clearly did.
yeah, I'm like, that's not value. You're not
Right.
adding value. Just give me my car. I'll get myself out safely. I'm fine. Thank you. But when it comes to never happens, at the end of the day, the entire concept here is that your client, your end consumer, has the best experience possible. And the only way to have that is to have your own standards. And with never happens, you are transferring the risk of having to deal with a really big issue an unknown amount of revenue loss, an unknown amount of time, right? Opportunity costs. It's very difficult to measure if it's even possible. You're trading that for the known loss and the known cost of having a check in place that prevents the never happening from happening. So could our clients get that policy in the mail and it be wrong? Yep. Could it cause issues? We don't know. It could cost us a ton. It could cost us the account. They could be like, if you can't get it right the first time, how can I expect you to get it right at time of claim?
Right.
So we transfer that unknown for the known of taking 10 minutes for one of our staffers to open the policy, read through it, repackage it, and mail it to the client, and the cost of the postage.
Much more cost effective.
Yes. It's now a known cost that you can bake into your overhead, and it'll never happen.
Right.
So thank you so much for listening to today's conversation. Be sure to stay in touch with us at the Mardigan Agency on Facebook and Instagram. And thanks, and we'll see you next time on Be Insured.